27. It's very professional in here.
They did a nice job.
Yeah.
It's also socially distanced.
Yes. Yep. These chairs are much more comfortable than the senior center chairs. Goodness. Glad the stools that were in here were not that great either.
They're too high.
Yeah.
I think with the anchor desk that used to be here,
Yeah.
you
Or the
needed them.
green screen. You need
Right.
the green screen. So you can do all the special effects. Sat in on a conference call, Zoom meeting with the, I guess it was more by CAPS, but also HASA too. And they just put out these really cool distance learning guidelines. I forwarded them over to Eric, but they're perfect. Like, I'm just going to take them and make them ours. They're really nice.
Cool.
You know, they give some sample schedules. Hopefully we won't have to use them, but if we ever did, you know, they were developed in Columbia. Somebody put a lot of work into them, and they gave them to us free, which is
That's awesome.
pretty nice. So Nick, how do you want us to handle the Q&A part?
So I just sent a message to everyone in the Zoom chat, and I'll send it out repeatedly as more people join.
Okay.
That if you want to say something, either type the message and I'll read it aloud, or just say you want to speak, and I'll unmute you when it's your turn.
Oh, because there's that raise hand button in here somewhere. Is that?
Yeah, they could try to use that. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I'm not sure if everyone will, but I mean, if I see someone raise their hand, I guess I can.
Okay. Or so either type the message or click the raise hand and
Yeah.
then. Okay, because I think our presentation is going to be pretty quick.
Yeah, it
then,
seemed like it was only like 4 or 5 slides.
Yeah.
And then it's just people asking questions and you guys answer.
Yep, that's it. That's good. So it's a good idea. Leave everybody muted until then, just so there's not a lot of crosstalk. All right, well, 6 o'clock. You want to go?
I do.
All right. We good to go, guys? All right. Well, hello, everybody in our Zoom chat here. I'm looking. We have 42, 44, 45. Actually, people are still rolling in. It's nice to see you all, although I don't really see you. I see a computer screen. My name is Charles Britton. I'm the new superintendent here at the Portland Public Schools, and I'm here with Kate Lawson. We're looking forward to introducing you to our reopening plans and of course, spending some time with you tonight answering questions that you may have. I can't promise that we'll have all of the answers, but Those questions that we can't answer, I will promise that we'll do our best to find out. So this morning, we released the full reopening plan. It is posted on the website, and if you go there, you can click the link and you can see our plans at the district level and at the building level. So the district level certainly gives the broader overview, but at the building level, you can start to dig into some of the day-to-day details that are certainly going to be different depending on developmental level of our students. So this is an opportunity for us to have a discussion and speak with Kathryn Lawson about what life is going to look like here in September, hopefully September 1st. So looking ahead, we are going to be starting school on September 1st, hopefully, right? So we were working up to this week under the assumption that if transmission rates of COVID-19 stay low enough, we would fully reopen come September 1st. What's interesting is this week, we did get a signal from the Connecticut State Department of Education, our governor and our commissioner of education, that there might be some flexibility. What's interesting is this week to allowing the district to open in a hybrid model. So a full reopening, of course, would be everybody coming back. That there might be some flexibility. Hybrid model would be that we would take our students and divide them in half. One group of students would come to school for 2 days, while the other group of students stayed home in distance learning format. The third day, we would all be in distance learning, which would give us the opportunity to clean the buildings. And then we would switch so that the second cohort would be in person, while the first cohort was home distance learning. The value in a hybrid would be that it would give us time to clean the buildings. It would allow us to cohort students more effectively, reduce capacity in the building, and through that, minimize any potential for transmission of the virus. So no decisions have been made yet about whether we're going to open fully, whether we're going to open in a hybrid, or whether we would go and begin in distance learning. I'm willing to bet that distance learning is not how we would start the school year if we all continue to do a good job and wear our masks and the transmission rates stay where they are in the state of Connecticut, which is we're in a really good place. Clearly, we're all aware of the news and know that other states aren't doing so well. But hopefully, if things stay where they are in the state of Connecticut, we will all be able to enjoy each other's company, or at least half of us enjoy each other's company in the fall. We are holding off on making any decisions about that until we receive further guidance. I'm speculating that we're probably going to make a decision about whether we're fully reopening or opening in a hybrid sometime around the middle of August. So the name of the game here is a little bit of patience. We're working hard to try to make sure that we do things that match what the data says about the current levels of transmission in the community and what we need to do to ease our way back into the school year in a manner that minimizes any potential spread of COVID-19. So with that said, that's the broad overview. Why don't I let Ms. Lawson talk a little bit more about specifically what things are going to look like here at Portland High School, and then of course we'll open it up to questions, and I'm sure there are plenty.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I had put together, first of all, good evening. I hope everyone is having a safe and restful summer and adjusting to our new normal as it comes to us. It has certainly been a pretty busy summer as we have moved through and working with the reopening team and working with the leadership team in Portland. I've put together a few slides and Nick is going to pull them up for us now to share with you. I know the plan was just released this morning. And so I wanted to sort of frame the plan and give some highlights of the plan so that when we have questions, you can ask them. Are we good? Okay. So first and foremost, reopening Portland High School. We have missed you and we have missed your children. And teachers, as they come in the building, are very often saying to me, wow, it feels so quiet. And boy, this is different. And it absolutely is, and it's going to be different. And I think part of our work this summer is preparing to honor that difference and to think about the things that we need to put in place as a school to help kids transition back, not only from a health and safety perspective, but from a social and emotional well-being. There's a lot of nerves with walking back into the building the first time. So our work this summer, that'll be the next slide, Nick. We've been talking about things that we needed to do to plan for whatever reopening looked like. And as I tried to group those into topics, I landed on what you see before you on the slide. Teacher committees that have been addressing things that we knew were challenges in the spring. Lots of questions about fair and equitable grading practices. Lots of questions about how to optimize distance learning for high school students if they're in that setting, and how to keep the school climate and spirit of Portland High School alive, even if we're not all sitting together. So we have a lot of teachers who are volunteering their time this summer to, via Google Meet, help brainstorm and come up with ideas and policies. We've also been planning and spending a lot of time measuring out physical spaces, and you'll see a couple of pictures of a classroom and what our library looks like, and planning for our anticipated needs. Just this week, our teachers have returned for half-hour individual appointments with me, where we're going into their classrooms and we're looking at the specific details that are necessary for each learning environment. An example of that would be in the public speaking classroom. We are going to need an extra partition, a plexiglass partition, so that when students deliver their speeches, they are socially distanced and have a layer of protection between them and their audience. We've been consistently, the leadership team, the teachers, the reopening committee, monitoring the health and safety directives and best practices that have been coming forth to us from not only Chatham Health District, but also state and all of our local officials. And we have really been developing our creative problem solving skills as a team. So on the next slide, we have many changes, and there will be more to come. Changes to our instructional practice. We won't be able to have kids huddle up in small groups to work on projects. So we are coming up with creative and innovative instructional strategies so that while they can't do that sitting next to one another, they still have the opportunity to collaborate and work together and problem solve. I mentioned our facilities. A major change coming to us this fall is in our schedule. We will be implementing a 4-period block schedule where the periods will be approximately 87 minutes long, and there will only be 4 of them each day. In the reopening plan, there is a graphic of that. And that will allow for fewer transitions at fewer times in the hall, less interactions, and the opportunity for a high school version of cohorting. Activities and athletics have been on the mind of a lot of students. I've had a lot of reach outs. Our district view on activities is to the greatest extent that safety and our current information from the health district will allow. I believe that athletics and activities are critically important to the experience for high school kids, and we are committed to providing all that we're allowed to provide. News is evolving from the CIAC on athletics virtually as we speak, with many different models being proposed, including a delayed start of athletics, a cohort model of athletics, and reducing the competition schedule so that there's not as much traveling. Our health protocols are changing, and I will speak more about that in a minute, as far as what happens if a student gets sick at school and when to stay home. As part of our new block schedule, we have doubled our lunch waves so that rather than 2 lunch waves of approximately 200 students, 180 students, we have 4 lunch waves of approximately 85 to 90 students. We are looking to spread out our common areas to include our cafeteria, our library media center, and our outside to allow students to socially distance and spread out for lunch. Lockers, we are going to restrict to morning and afternoon on the way in and on the way out, and allow students to carry their backpacks with them throughout the day. Our bathrooms, for the purposes of contact tracing, will need to be very closely monitored and have adult supervision to make sure that the number of students remains very low who go in at a time, as well as knowing who was in there when, in case we need to just do any contact tracing. And then our visitors policy. I think you will find that it will be restrictive. We are putting in an outside drop box. So for the families or the parent that needs to just drop off a form, they don't even need to come into the building. We are reconfiguring our main office space to create what I call a doctor's office window, so that you can slide, you can interact with our office staff without coming physically into the office space. And we are exploring software applications that will allow students and visitors to sign in and sign out with an app and a QR code rather than a pen and pencil on a pad of paper. So those are just the highlights of some pretty significant changes to a day in the life of Portland High School. The next slide, I think, is probably the most important, and I hope will provide some sense into the vision of the faculty at PHS. I want to talk about what's not going to change. What is not going to change is our ongoing commitment to equity and to access. Portland High School has been, prior to everything that's happened in 2020, committed to understanding the factors that affect how different families and different communities can access their education. We are working to continue that with our faculty. Every faculty member is reading a text this summer called Grading for Equity. We are working with our technology department to make sure that internet access truly is internet access and not just a poor connection, because that has been problematic for our students in the past. And we are committed to, as we have been, to our culturally responsive teaching, our review of our curriculum and our instructional practices through the lens of equity, and our commitment to academic rigor. Academic rigor is not going away at Portland High School, and it is certainly not going away in a distance learning environment. I think it will look different. I think it will look compacted with priority curriculum and standards. We are continuing to move forward with our program of studies. We have added advanced placement statistics this year. We have added a robotics course. We are continuing to work to make sure that all of our practices, align with 21st century learning. Professional development has been key. Lots of new learning for teachers, lots of new learning for administrators, and it will be lots of new learning for kids. Much of it will be focused on how to teach remotely, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that good teaching is good teaching. And much of our work will continue to be on those core tenets of teaching, learning, and students. And last but not least is our Highlander spirit and pride. We have a committee of teachers that met today to think of fun and engaging ways we can safely socially engage with kids, and they can engage with one another. We have our Student Senate, which is working under the direction of their advisor, Mrs. Statler, to produce phase 2 of freshman orientation so that our newest Highlanders can come in feeling more comfortable and secure. And we will continue as much as we are allowed to keep that Highlander spirit alive. And my last slide before we turn it over to questions is what we need from you as families and what we need from our students. Somewhere along the line in all of this, masks and protocols and coronavirus became a very hotly debated issue. And although it is not the role of the school to in any way come down politically on either side of that issue, what I am asking for is parental support with our guidelines and our protocols. We need students to wear masks. We need students to be compliant. We need families to be compliant. For example, if we are allowed to have a scrimmage with no fans, we need your help making sure there are no fans so that the kids can continue to play. We need open communication and we need questions. And I've included my email address for those of you who don't have that. Please do not get your information about Portland High School exclusively from social media. Please call me. Please email me. Come in. If you need to see something to reassure yourselves, please, we'll make it happen. I think that's critically important. And it's also important to me if your child is experiencing some anxiety. My door is open and I am very happy to have someone come in socially distanced and take a look at the space if that will help them feel more comfortable returning to school. I also would welcome any questions or concerns of a private or personal nature if you have an individual family situation that you would like to talk to me about. And I need your ideas and your creative ideas and your solutions. We were very lucky this year that our parent community came together in an amazing way through the Project Graduation Committee to make our graduation ceremony spectacular. The Project Grad parents took care of the decorations, the staging, the planning, the streamer guns, the balloons, you name it. I may need that again. I may need some support with making this warm and welcoming, because if you look at the slide of the classroom, I'm not sure it is. We are looking to create outdoor seating areas. And we would be very interested in families or people who have connections who know where we could acquire outdoor seating or tents that we could borrow. We want to give the kids as many opportunities to be outside and to feel the warmth of their school as we possibly can. So please, any creative ideas, please reach out to me directly, because we are certainly open to anything that will make this experience good for kids. So in a nutshell, that is my reopening plan for Portland High School. It's certainly, as everyone says, evolving, but we are committed, and we are excited, and we want to see your kids soon. I'm good.
Well,
That's it.
Well done. I mean, so why don't we do this? That was probably a lot. Why don't we open it up for some questions and
Sure.
see what's on people's minds? I saw one in the chat here, Ms. Lawson. It was from Stephanie, and she wants to know, what time will the earliest and latest lunch waves be?
10:45 to 12:30.
Okay. Stephanie, feel free to shoot a follow-up question in the chat, and we can answer that one too.
It's approximately the same time as they were. But what we are doing is building out one of the blocks to include the capacity for a lunch wave. So students will either go to class, eat lunch, and then go back to class, or do some variation of that during the block.
And then you're looking to have students potentially eat outside or in different locations?
Yes, we're going to spread out using the library, the cafeteria. We're exploring the main gallery and outside if the weather permits.
Excellent. All right. Guys, can you unmute Karen Mazza? Karen, can you hear us?
I can't unmute. Oh, hi.
I gotcha. We can hear you, Karen.
All right. I have two. Hi. I have two questions. My first question is that in a total about face 3 days ago, Commissioner Cardona and Governor Lamont put the decision-making power back in the hands of the district as to which model they were going to use. And I know that was just thrown out there in a press conference. I don't know if there's been anything official from their offices giving that decision-making power to districts, but has there been any discussion about opening in a hybrid model instead in Portland?
Yeah. Sure. So certainly keeping track of a lot of the changes is sort of like figuring out the New England weather, right? I mean, if you don't like the decision, wait a minute, right? But in fairness, I do want to put out there that I have been impressed with our state leadership. They absolutely are listening. They're hearing from districts, and they're trying to figure this out as we go. And boy, do they have a tough job. I mean,
Yep.
The governor and the commissioner, they're doing terrific work. I've been in many conference calls and Zoom meetings with them, and they're really trying. They really are listening. So what happened was, originally they came out and said, yes, if transmission rates are low, we would all fully reopen. And then they gave us guidelines to develop a plan where we were going to develop 3 models, but default to the full reopening. They heard from a lot of districts that was going to be very difficult. They have to consider, in some cases, high schools of 3,000 to 4,000 kids, many very large places, older buildings, urban districts, rural districts, suburban districts. And after hearing from all of that, what I heard in the press conference was that there would be some flexibility that might allow for districts to open either in person fully or hybrid. Now, I don't think it's wise to make any decisions based on what you hear in a press conference. We're going to wait to see if there are any executive orders, legislative actions, or votes taken by the Connecticut State Board of Education. But I don't think it's such a great idea to jump out ahead of this and say, this is what we're going to do before we see, the formal communications that give us that flexibility. But you are accurate that Monday. If I were going to take my takeaway from that Monday press conference, which was very interesting, was Portland Public Schools and school districts throughout the state might enjoy some local decision-making ability.
Okay, that's a very fair answer. Thank you for that. And I have one other question, and that is for students who choose, for whatever reason, to not come back in person and start the school year with distance learning while Portland does either the hybrid or the full reopen. I looked at the plan and it's not, can you just explain what their curriculum would be? Would they have their regular class schedule with access to the regular curriculum for those classes that they are registered for right now? Or is something else entirely going to happen with the kids that are working from home? And I'm interested for those kids that will be starting off from home, but also for those kids who might have to transition quite immediately to a 14-day quarantine if they were exposed, or what will happen with the kids that are learning at home?
So there is not a perfect answer to that.
Okay.
What we are looking to do right now is identify within each of our academic departments a part of a teaching assignment to have a teacher be the coordinator for distance learning. And what that will allow, if you think of a department like English, is depending on the number of students, we may not need to run a distance learning English 9, 10, 11, and 12. We may run a distance learning English that has standards and curriculum aligned to our current curriculum. In other subject areas, that's not going to work. You can't do that with French, where you have kids in French 1 and French 3. And you certainly can't do it when you reach those very high level, sophisticated courses at the AP level. So we are looking first and foremost to get a handle on who is making that election to stay home, and then to look to see how to best program for them. We would certainly be programming for any special education needs. We would be programming for any English language needs. What we are guaranteeing is that students will have access to their core academic content and physical education. I would love to be able to guarantee access to a full complement of our course of studies, but I'm not willing to I don't want to give false hopes to that. And my answer, Karen, is really we will do the absolute best we can to make the distance learning experience as rich as we possibly can. But it will not be you are enrolled in an English 10 class and that teacher that you would be in if you were in school is your distance learning teacher. It will have a different look.
Okay, so if that's the approach that Portland takes, let's say we get hypothetically 4 weeks of in-person school and the whole state shuts down. What happens to the children learning at home, not from their classroom teachers? Would they then be able to access the curriculum from their classroom teachers if we all go to distance learning?
I will say with a 0.75% certainty, probably. Because what we would be looking to do is create a distance learning section for students who are would be taught by teachers who are staying home because they are unable to return to work. But that work would be under the direction of the course content teachers, and it would be aligned. So the goal, especially if it looked like we were going to be in distance learning long term, would be to transition those students back. As I said in my report, although the district is only asking for a week's notice to transition between the two models, it is my strong recommendation that we, to the greatest extent possible, students do that at the quarter. Because it makes sense for content coverage, curriculum alignment, and just, I think, transitioning on the kids. So that's going to be my recommendation.
Yeah, I could add to that a little bit too, and this is for everybody. I should have mentioned this during my remarks. On Friday, August 7th, so that's a week from tomorrow, we're going to send out another survey to parents. And this survey is going to be very similar to the one we sent out in July, where we asked parents, are you planning to have your students return to school? And 8% of our parents indicated that they would not have their students return to school, but 23%, actually I think it was closer to 30%, indicated that they were uncertain. The survey that we send out on August 7th is going to remove the uncertain option from the questions and ask parents at this point, are you comfortable sending your students back to school? We're going to try to have that information verified, and anybody who doesn't respond to the survey, our administrative assistants are going to be calling, so that if we send it out Friday, by the following Wednesday, Ms. Lawson and the counselors are going to have the names of the students who are requesting a distance learning program. Once we have that nailed down and know who the students are, K through 12, that are going to request distance learning, at the high school level, the counselors are going to take a close look at the schedule, look at who's teaching what, work with Ms. Lawson, and to the maximum extent possible, individualize each student's schedule. Now, there are lots of other things we can look at, like Connecticut Virtual High School and other online and creative things we can look to. I'm also meeting with area superintendents to see if we can coordinate some of our programming regionally. So we're taking a close look at how we can maximize the online program of studies for our high school students. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet. That's why that data that we get from the November 7th survey is going to be so important.
All right, thank you, and thank you for your hard work. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. All right. So let's see. I'm seeing here Stephanie had another question. Can we unmute Stephanie? She had a question here about any discussion about starting the day later, and she may have had another question in here too.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Stephanie.
One of the comments I had made in the original survey was there's study after study that shows that high school kids that start their day later do better academically, socially, etc. Given that we don't know whether or not we're going to have after school activities, has there been any consideration given to starting our day not at 7:45 a.m.?
The short answer is no, not as part of the pandemic planning. I am well aware of that research that you're talking about, that, teenagers benefit from a later start date to the school. And I think that's an important conversation for a non-pandemic time for us to have. The only change to the minutes of the school day that's been made so far is that the first 4 school days, September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, those will be half days, but that's half days, kids going home earlier in the afternoon. But no discussion or decisions about starting school later.
And I would add, Stephanie, that one of the things that we are going to do, and really the purpose of it is to keep the numbers down in the building, is that all students who have either the first block of the day or the last block of the day without a class scheduled, if they are able, will be able to, if they have their transportation, will be able to come later, leave early. And I think that will also help give kids a couple of mornings to sleep in if they have a first or a second period free.
Yes, I agree. That would be helpful. On the 2 days that the kids are home, is the plan or the expectation that they will still have class, and I say that in quotation marks, at the same time that they do on the days that they're in the building? Or will it really be that the materials will be in their Google classrooms and they won't have any expectations to be in a Zoom class?
The first, they will be expected on the days they are distance learning to be part of what we're calling synchronous learning, which is in real time with the teachers when their class would meet.
Okay. And so one more question.
Sure.
In the last year, before we all came home, you had put together a proposed schedule that had 5 periods a day, and then the win blocks. So I'm guessing that's been saved for later.
Tabled.
Broken my heart
Yeah.
because I loved that schedule, but yes.
I have it in my hand and I'm looking at it, Miss Lawson. So yes, I saved my copy of it.
It took me a couple of weeks to come to terms with that loss. But
Don't give up on that. It's a great schedule.
it is a great schedule and it really allows for personalization. But
Right,
we're
right.
not there yet.
I think it would be challenging to try and implement that in this new world that we're in. So
No, but a silver lining will be, though, that by going to the blocks, we're going to practice with longer instructional time. So I think we would be better prepared to implement that schedule when we're all vaccinated and out of this current crisis.
okay, and sorry, my husband's in the other room and he's yelling at me because he's watching from the other room. Do you have a sense as to when the schedules for the kids will be available to them?
I would say mid-August.
Okay. I won't ask any more questions until everybody else has a turn.
Yeah, all right. You can always email us, too.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
So I'm looking in the chat here, and boy, does Jen ask an important question. So can we unmute Jen and let her ask that question of us so everybody can hear? Hi, Jen, you're unmuted.
She doesn't seem like she wants to.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll ask the question for Jen then. Jen wants to know what happens if a student or teacher tests positive. That's a good question, right? And that's something that certainly has our attention. Let me start with this. It is really important this year that even if it's something slight, we take time in the morning to ask ourselves some important questions. Do I have a fever? Does my stomach ache? Has my sense of taste changed in any way? Do I have any body chills? Do I have a sore throat? Even the slightest sign or symptom of COVID that any of us have, that is a stay home opportunity for both students and teachers. I can tell you, and I'm sure I can speak for Ms. Lawson, that I have been guilty of taking a little bit of Advil and sucking it up and going to work when I wasn't always feeling well because I've been busy or it was inconvenient or I just had too many things to do. And sometimes I even saw that maybe as a little bit of my work ethic. Hey, I'm gonna power through this and I'm gonna get through it. That can't be the normal next year. If any of us aren't feeling well ever, we must stay home. That's got to be a commitment we make to all of us. I understand that that's going to mean we're going to have more students out sick and more teachers out sick during the school year. We're going to manage that. That's okay. If you're not feeling well, stay home. The question is, what happens, God forbid, when a student or a teacher tests positive? That to us is going to be something that needs to be communicated to us so that we know about it. And certainly we have to, figure out what that means in terms of HIPAA and protecting people's right to health privacy. But we will need to know that so that we can do what's called contact tracing. Now, let me be clear about that. The school isn't going to do the contact tracing more broadly in the community, but we're going to know where that student or that teacher was during the school day, who was in a class with that student, what bus that student might have been on, like Ms. Lawson said, what bathroom that student might have used. By us knowing that, we'll know exactly how to clean and disinfect and put our efforts into sanitizing those areas. We're also going to work very closely with our Chatham Health District this year and make sure that they know what our infection rates are in the school and that they guide us in our response. Now, what that response means, whether it means we isolate a certain cohort of students, whether it means we close a school, whether it means we close the district, those are all things that are on the table. Depending on how the Chatham Health District directs us, we may have to say to a certain group of students or a certain group of teachers that you need to quarantine for 14 days, go see your doctor, get the testing that you need to do to keep yourself safe and figure out where you are. It may also mean that I, as a superintendent, have to, the same way I would in a blizzard, close schools for a day. All of that would be in close coordination and guided by advice from the experts in the Chatham Health District and the Department of Public Health. But if a student or a teacher tests positive, we need to know about it. We need to do our work to find out who else may have been exposed and then consult with the experts from Chatham Health District, rely on their guidance, which could include up to and include the potential of closing a school, a district, or isolating certain cohorts of people. So thank you for that question, Jen. That is consuming a lot of our time and our planning. That's a really important consideration. All righty, so can we unmute Patty Clark, who has a comment on grading and distance learning?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Well, thank you so much for this. This is wonderful. It feels much less formal than a Board of Ed meeting, so I'm glad that we're doing this, so thank you. My question was, Ms. Lawson, thank you for that committee on grading. I think it's great. But I was curious if you could just tell me a little more about what your motivation was in starting that committee and what you're really looking at specifically for grading. And if it is, I'm thinking, is it to really have some different grading criteria potentially for distance learning versus in class, or am I way off base?
You're not off base at all. We have a couple of issues at play. The work of fair and equitable grading that is free of bias transcends COVID. It is work that districts are doing across the state, across the country. You hear a lot of schools talking about grading by standards, grading by mastery versus grading by whether something gets turned in on time. And those are huge philosophical debates in the field of education. For the purposes of the reopening and the purposes of looking at distance learning, back in the spring, we were very concerned that students who were now all of a sudden without any preparation, any training, and any support thrust into a remote situation where they did not have the skills necessary, and in many cases, the resources necessary to access their education. And quite frankly, their teachers were learning the skills for how to do a Zoom meet and how to do a Google Meet. And we did not want our students to be penalized for that long term. We created a distance learning grading scale, which probably everyone except the incoming freshman parents received last spring, which essentially allowed for a pass-fail option if a student finished their coursework in the area of a C or a D. So if you earned an A, you got an A. If you earned a B, you got a B. But if you earned a C or a D, you could get a P unless you requested the letter grade. And we did have a couple of families request the letter grade. We also took a very critical look at the number of students who actually failed a course. And I can say through the diligence of the staff and the work of the support personnel, the only students who failed courses were students who didn't turn their computer on. And despite all kinds of, including one-on-one tutorial and assistance. We made every effort to meet kids where they were. Families were under, and still are, an incredible amount of stress. Many of our older students were helping watch younger students and helping them with their distance learning while parents worked. Many of our high school students were picking up additional hours at work so that because adults in their family had been laid off or furloughed from their positions. So we really wanted to make things work in whatever way was possible for students. What we were finding as we analyzed that and as we look towards the fall is that this has now become a more normalized, unfortunately, process. We know a whole lot more about how best to do it and how best to teach in that model, and our teachers are continuing to learn. So the grading committee is looking at the policy that we used in the spring to see if there are changes that we want to make as far as what does that look like. Some of the things that they're considering are having the grades stay as numerical grades, as letter grades, unless an extenuating situation presents itself where it would become a pass-fail. So if you have a family in need or a student, you know, that has a family member, we had students with family members with COVID. So that's one of the options we're thinking about. We're also thinking about really what does the 0 do mathematically to grades, especially when things are missing and aren't turned in on time. And what do we want to look at things that really showed 0% mastery, or do we want to look at things that are missing and we don't have enough evidence to tell you how much they learned, whether they passed it or they failed it, because we don't have anything to look at because it's not turned in. So those, I could probably do a 3-hour seminar on grading reform if anyone would like to. But this is certainly a current educational issue. And we're looking for distance learning and for hybrid to make sure that kids aren't penalized for not having face-to-face access with their teachers.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for, because my son, and I'm sure many others in Portland too, was a very different student, sitting home in a recliner with a laptop versus having the motivation of his awesome teachers right around him. And I just had a lot of concerns about that. So thank you.
And we are going to have a culture shift with our students. And when I say we, I mean teachers and parents, because distance learning in the fall is going to look very different than distance learning looked like in the spring.
Okay.
So that will be a shift for kids as well.
So my second question is kind of related to that. I know this is wildly unpopular, and if there's any teenagers listening in, they're going to say, who is Patty Clark? But actually, going along the lines of what Stephanie was saying about how important sleep is, I was actually thinking a little bit of the opposite. However, if we could replicate on those 2 home days, if we could replicate the time, and again, nobody wants to hear that their teenagers have classes at 7:30, 7:40, but to the greatest extent possible, if we could keep the schedule somewhat the same, just so my son especially, and a lot of kids, like their sleep cycle stays the same. Otherwise, if he doesn't have a Google Meet till 10:30, 11, he's going to say, awesome, cool, I can stay up super late Monday night. Sleep, I just think it's going to get him off. And if we are going to eventually perhaps go to that 2 days home, 2 days school, or 3-2, whichever, if we could just try to keep the kids' sleep schedule as much as we can, I know that's difficult but not popular. I understand my son.
Well, so that will be attainable if we are in a full distance model, because the learning will be synchronous and the students will be accessing their teachers during the times that their classes would meet if we were in the building. Where that may be challenging, or will be challenging, I can say, is if we are in the hybrid, because if your students are in the Monday, Tuesday cohort, and then they're working from home Thursday and Friday, the teachers will be teaching the Thursday and Friday cohort what they taught on Monday and Tuesday. So the learning during the hybrid model, the remote learning, will be asynchronous, and the students will not be as locked in unless they're collaborating with other members of their class, which I know teachers are working to use Google Meet breakout rooms so that kids can work in small groups either under their direction or independently. So that may be part of the hybrid.
Because I'm already thinking ahead that, like our family, many families will now have parents return to the workforce. So we're not home to police the distance learning like we were in March and April. So if parents can be kept informed of when those meets would be, I know it's always posted in Google Classroom, and I know they should be communicating with their parents, but this way, if I'm at work, I can at least say, hey, did you get on at 10? Or just, I'm wondering how parents would be notified. Maybe I'd have to just start checking my son's Google Classroom. I could do that.
So a couple of different things, and this may answer some other folks' questions as well. One of the things that we identified as a challenge in the spring was that there are multiple ways to configure a Google Classroom and multiple ways to post information, announcements, assignments, and work. We are going to work as a faculty to pick a model so that if you are looking at a biology Google Classroom, the homework is going to be in the same place as if you're looking at an English Google Classroom, with the idea of making that more accessible to kids and to parents. The other piece that I think is important, and it will be very directly communicated to kids by me, and I'm hoping it will be equally as directly communicated to kids by their parents, is that whether you're in hybrid or whether you're in person or distance learning, when you're scheduled to be in class, that time is for class.
Sure, because I know, and this was, like you said, we're moving into, distance learning is going to be different than it was in March and April, right? Because I think,
yes,
going back to March and April, it was a lot of language around, it'd be great if you could join us, and I know we had to use that language because there were just some families who, for illness or whatever reason, they couldn't. But I would think moving forward, like it sounds like it's going to happen. The message is going to be a little more stronger to kids. These are mandatory. Hop on when you can. If there's other issues at home, just reach out. Because I think,
correct.
yeah,
Correct. They will be mandatory. We will also be requiring that students keep their cameras on when they're participating in synchronous learning. One of the issues that we ran into in the spring was the students logging into the Meet, muting their mics and shutting off their video, and teachers weren't sure if they had gone back to sleep or not.
Mm-hmm.
So we are absolutely, unless an extenuating circumstance exists,
Sure.
we are going to be mandating that kids keep their cameras on to participate fully in the synchronous learning.
All right. Well, I appreciate that you guys are doing all this because, again, like myself, like many parents, we're going to be out at work. So we're no longer going to be able to run around getting their Chromebooks for them. So thank you. And I appreciate everything, all the teachers and leadership. I just appreciate what everyone's doing.
And my expectation for high school students is that we are preparing them to do those executive skills of getting themselves on their meets, to prepare them for the Google Meets they're going to have in the workplace and the Google Meets they're going to have in college. This is really a game changer. And I see a lot of the things that our students struggled with as far as managing their own time, regulating their work, communicating independently with their teachers because there wasn't a specific time slot. It very much mirrored what I have college freshmen tell me is the biggest adjustment to freshman year in college, as far as not having your life programmed for you.
Sure. Thank you.
So Brenda Giebert asks if Kyle says Kyle is curious if gym is an option. Maybe if we can unmute Brenda and engage in a discussion there about that.
Sure, I can answer that. We have some pretty specific guidelines around physical education and more to come. But the general rule is that we need to look at individual physical activity as opposed to team and sports. And this will probably be the most unpopular thing I will say this evening. If there are students listening, we probably will not be playing Ultimate Frisbee in the fall in the gym at Portland High School. What I hope we will be doing is using outside. And I hope we will be spreading out, and I hope we will be using our beautiful fields, and we will be maximizing the weather to the greatest extent possible for physical education.
Awesome. Thank you.
Brenda, did you have any other questions, or did that cover it?
This is good for now. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. All right. So M. Wright would like to know, if we can unmute M. Wright, she'd like to know when students will be given specifics about the new block schedule and their daily schedule of classes, and whether a student returns in person or is not returning in person right away. So specific.
So, is that me? Okay.
Yep.
I'm getting an echo. We are hoping to have schedules ready for students in the middle of August. We have done several iterations of a master schedule, trying to make sure that to the greatest extent possible, kids are able to get the courses that they had asked for before we were in this position. The second part of that question was
Daily schedules of classes. Is Emright unmuted?
Michelle, right?
Is it Michelle?
Yep.
Michelle, are you with us?
Hi, I think so. Can you hear me?
We can. Yeah. Why don't you ask the question? Then I can.
Yeah, I think the when was answered. I believe somebody else asked the question when, and I think you said the middle of August. But I was just curious about the how. Like, how would it be communicated? Like, would it be over Google Classroom? Are they going to get something in the mail? Just those types of specifics.
What I have been doing for most of the spring, whenever I've communicated anything, has been communicating it in the school messenger to parents, email to faculty, and Google Classroom to kids. So we have a PHS Google Classroom that every student at Portland High School is a member of. We will also be, as we always do, sending out blasts reminding families that these things exist. And asking kids to check in. Usually it's pretty rapid fire information. As soon as the portal opens and schedules are available, it seems to travel pretty quickly throughout town. But the instruction as far as what does a block schedule look like, when do you have to go to period 1, when do you have to go to period 2, is going to happen in small groups in that first week of school. Because those are half days when kids will be practicing. One of the things that I didn't mention, which will be new learning for kids, is that we may be relocating some classrooms. So for example, those of you who are familiar with the high school, the classrooms in the main hallway are smaller than the classrooms in the English hallway and in the science hallway. So if we have a social studies class that has, say, 22 kids in it, we may move that class to an unused science classroom, which I can socially distance and fit 24 students in. So it'll be teaching kids things like that. They may have to get used to finding their teachers in different spots.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Thank you to you both for doing this.
You're welcome. Of course. Okay, so we have Lisa Daggett. Lisa, why don't we unmute Lisa Daggett? And she would like to know if we end up going to distance learning, is it possible for teachers to conduct daily Zoom meetings at the regular class times? Lisa, did you want to add anything to that question, or did I get it right?
No, yeah, I think you answered it. That was great. The only other question I had was about masks. Are they going to be required for students and for teachers?
They are going to be required of everyone in the building. We have gotten some guidelines recently that if someone is, and I believe it's 12 feet apart with a plexiglass barrier, the masks can come off for instructional purposes. We actually had this conversation today talking about the public speaking class, because so much of public speaking is your facial expression and how you enunciate and all of those things. The general rule of thumb, though, is that masks are required. We are looking to build in to each of the 87-minute blocks a staggered mask break time, where the classroom, and I haven't quite sorted out how we're going to organize that yet. A certain cluster of classrooms will have a 10-minute or 15-minute window where they can go outside, take the masks off, stretch a little bit, because 87 minutes is a long time without movement. And if you were doing a block schedule in a non-epidemic situation, you would see movement within the classroom the entire time. You would see kids regrouping and going to stations and moving against the wall. We can't do that. So we'll be looking at breaks where they can, again, pray for a nice warm fall so we can push it as light as we can to get them outside to take those masks off. And they'll be able to take them off when they eat lunch.
Okay.
Not too
Do
warm.
you know, and sorry, I'm not sure if you do know, but with regards to sports, if CIAC does decide to have sports come back in some capacity, is it your understanding that there will be masks required there, like for kids sitting on the benches?
Yes, my understanding, and I am not a CIAC expert, in the reopening plan is the 18-page preliminary document from CIAC with what was given to us in the beginning of July about summer conditioning practices and how we can phase those back in. The Shoreline Conference has taken a very conservative approach to that. They're very nervous about exposing anyone at this stage of our reopening. But my understanding is that unless you are competing on the field, court, track, race, you will have your mask on. But while you are in play, you will be able to remove it.
Okay. Okay. And that's something that I assume officials, coaches will enforce. So if you have
Yes.
a kid, just kind of, oh, gee, I forgot. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
the same way, and enforcement is going to become a conversation.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have students who feel incredibly strongly about the protection of wearing masks.
Right.
And our expectations is that students will do that. I think we'll give a lot of mask reminders as we start the culture shift. But the bottom line is these students are 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and they need to wear their masks.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a tough balance. I think my son's going to be a senior. And so of course he wants to participate in all these senior activities, right?
Mhm.
He doesn't want to miss out on sports or class really senior year. But obviously I just want to make sure that there are kind of precautions and enforcement in place just so they can kind of do that safely.
And truly the message to the kids, and I'm already working with the president of the Student Senate, is the more we as a collective community keep these numbers down, the more we'll be able to do.
Yep.
And that includes hanging out in the weekends and all of those pieces. Because I want nothing more than to be able to do all of our traditional senior activities and hold a pep rally outside and do all those fun things. So it really will be a collective effort on keeping those numbers down.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, so if we can unmute Kim Nagy Marushak. Kim also has a question about synchronous learning. Kim, do you wanna phrase the question for us?
Hi, yes. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. I understand families are making the decisions themselves to keep students at home. And as Patty Clark had talked about, it will be different this time that families will be working. I am choosing to keep my children home for safety, and they will be here alone. I know that in the spring, it was challenging for kids to stay motivated. And I think having those Google Meets with their classroom really gave them that sense of community and motivation to stay engaged. So I am very concerned if these students who are staying at home for distance learning don't have that opportunity. So I didn't know if there was any discussion about, I understand you can't do it for every period of the day, all day, but any opportunities to engage in some sort of live synchronous learning throughout the day.
Absolutely. And forgive me if I wasn't clear. The students that are electing distance learning will be receiving synchronous learning.
Okay.
It just may not be from the teacher of the course they would have been in had they been in school. So there absolutely will be synchronous learning.
Okay, thank you
Does
so
that make
much.
sense? Okay, I
Yes,
want to make sure I
that
was
makes
clear with
sense.
that.
Yes, thank you for that clarification, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
The one thing I would like to add before we take the next question is if there is anyone out there, if you have any community members or friends who are really on the fence and need to come in and see the space, please email me. I would be happy to share with whatever I can do to let people make an informed decision.
Okay, so interesting. The next question appears to be from Portland High School to everyone. I'm not sure if there's somebody with handle Portland High School out there that we could unmute.
Nick.
Nick, is that you that wrote that question?
Yeah, we got a private comment, so I posted it so everyone could see.
I'll read the question, or maybe it's from Megan. Megan, is my understanding that the high school will be on one schedule and K-8 is on another. Is that correct? Why isn't 7-12 on the same schedule?
7-12 is on the same schedule.
And then we have Adrian DeLeon. Reese. Any chance? Figure out who is unmuted for that.
So I can speak to the schedules while we're figuring out the next speaker. The middle school and the high school are on the same block schedule. The middle school, because of the developmental age of the kids, is doing a more strict cohorting model, where the students that are in the same science class will be in the same social studies class, and we'll have their day structured that way. They're also going to be centered in a home-based classroom where teachers will come to them rather than them moving class to class. So it will definitely, and our new middle school principal, I believe, is up next Thursday, and he'll have a lot more details to share on that.
So that was Megan.
Okay.
Megan, I saw you were unmuted.
Yeah, sure. No, I just wanted to clarify that because we met with the middle school principal last night. And it sounded like the K through 8 was going to be on, for lack of a better word, the same bus schedule. And then, the 9 through 12 would be, the high school would be something separate. And I don't know if there was some confusion there, but it just seemed to me it didn't make sense since the middle school and high school were in the same building. That they should be the same, opening, closing, whatever,
Right. So the bell schedule will be the same as it has always been. The transportation will be the same with a kindergarten through grade 6 run and then a 7 through 12. What I think he was speaking to is that all the students in grades pre-K through 8 are following a cohorting model where the kids are traveling together with the same 20, 22 kids, 17 kids throughout the whole day. Because of the diversity of scheduling of the high school students, that's not feasible, which is why we are looking at the block schedule. The middle school is actually benefiting from both models and is probably going to be the most cohorted and then have the longest blocks of any school in the district.
Okay, because one thing he had also mentioned is that the kids' families were going to be grouped together. So
Yes.
you didn't have kids going on different schedules. So even if you have a child in high school and they're in a different school, will they still be on the same schedule?
Correct. So I'm thinking that you're thinking if we go to the hybrid model where
Yeah,
your students
sorry,
are
yeah.
only coming Monday, Tuesday, and then they're home Thursday, Friday, we are going to keep families vertically together. And so we will very loosely divide it alphabetically, 50% in each side, and then make adjustments. Not everyone in a family has the same last name. Sometimes you have students in a household that aren't maybe in the same family in the computer. We're gonna keep those families together.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would even
thank
I
you.
would characterize it as it's not even necessarily the family. It's people who reside in the same
The household.
house, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's not because there obviously could be more than just families. There are lots of different reasons people live under the same, but people under the same roof will be in the same cohort,
Great, thank you both.
of course. Okay, so Adrian Delian Reyes. Adrian, can we have you unmuted and
He said his question was already answered, so he's all set. So move on to the next one.
okay, while we're waiting for Adrian to get unmuted, I'll read his question. His question was, by any chance, will we have the choice of keeping our kids at home?
So he said his question was already answered.
Oh, okay.
So move on to the next one.
Great, thank you. Okay, Karen Reinhardt. If we can unmute Karen, she would like us to explain how classes will work that reduce shared materials. Excellent question. Good one. Guys, we're asking all the right questions.
So Karen emailed the Zoom Portland account, so I don't think.
Okay.
Can I just answer it?
Yeah, just
Okay.
answer it. Yep.
We can interact, but I would talk about the question.
Okay, so we will be looking for kids, as we always have, to have many of their own personal items around pens, pencils, notebooks, those types of things, where we will probably, and it may be a culture shift for some of our students, the pencil cup that sits on the teacher's desk where you can come take a pencil if you forgot one will probably not be there. Because that does breed sharing of materials. We are also looking to purchase individual materials for things like protractors and compasses, where in the past we may have only had 50 of them in the math department, we may need 100 of them so that people taking the geometry course can all use their own. Students may be, especially in the fine arts, and I saw there were some questions coming around band and chorus, and I can speak to that as well. Maybe looking for masks that facilitate singing, bell covers that go over personal, like the flare of the trombone, and personal material like that obviously one would not share. And where the challenge exists, to Karen's question, is going to be in the areas of our curriculum, mostly in our CTE, our culinary, where kids use large pieces of equipment. Two things will happen. So if we're talking about a bandsaw in the materials processing class, the curriculum will either be adjusted so that kind of shared material, if it cannot be reasonably cleaned, will not be used. If it can be reasonably cleaned and sanitized, either by allowing gaps within its use or allowing it has a surface that allows itself to be cleaned, there'll be a cleaning protocol that needs to be put in place before another student uses that.
Excellent question. Karen, did that answer the question? Are you comfortable with that? Okay, let me go to Craig Brown. Another great question. You guys are all asking the right questions here. What happens when a family member tests positive? I hope that doesn't happen. If that were to happen, I guess my first question would be is that family member somebody who you live with and has had close contact with prior to or during or after the positive test? If that were to be the case, you were in contact with someone who tested positive, then that would be a 14-day quarantine and stay home.
And I expect we will see some evolving directions from health officials.
Right. Yep. Craig, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
No, it's just the idea that we covered what happens when students or teachers test positive, but they're not the only ones in the equation.
That's right. Yep, that's right. Again, we're hoping nobody tests positive, but from what the way I see read the guidelines is if you have been potentially exposed, that would be a 14-day quarantine period. I think what Ms. Lawson is talking about, and I agree. There is talk of more rapid tests and that type of thing that the FDA may be approving, but for now, the current guidelines, unless it changed in the past day, which depending on how quickly things change these days is likely, it's still a 14-day period. I understand that if you are potentially exposed, home for 14 days. Good question from Kathryn Hunter. Kathryn, you want to unmute Kathryn Hunter, and she would like to engage in this discussion about band and chorus.
So,
Hi there.
Go ahead, Kathryn.
Well, it was more my daughter, but she didn't want to talk. I guess they're just curious, her and her friends are just like, what if you guys, and I know everything is still so up in the air, like if you have some sort of idea of what band and chorus may look like for them next year, given whichever scenario we're in.
So we have, we all know that music is part of the heart and soul of Portland High School. And I was just meeting actually this morning with Mrs. Novak, and we walked the band room and we walked the auditorium. And there's a bunch of different ways that we can approach this. Like I said, there may be some materials that we are requesting as far as specialized masks that allow students to get more air in them to project when they sing, as well as bell covers that exist over brass instruments. And also Mrs. Novak was telling me that they are, and I have a hard time envisioning this, but they now have masks where your instrument kind of fits into the mask. And because we're all close here, I'm going to also talk to you about how we're going to plan for a protocol for cleaning the spit valves out of instruments, and the hand sanitizing station we need to put in place when trombonists go outside to clean their instrument. So those are the mechanical pieces. The structural pieces are the social distancing within the band classroom, within the chorus classroom, using the ensemble rooms for small group or individual work, and then using the auditorium, because our auditorium seats 600 people. So you can spread kids almost 6 seats apart and fit an entire band or chorus into that area. So we are looking at that. Our challenge with that right now is looking at how we would sanitize cloth seats. So we're investigating that. But what I can say very confidently is our commitment is to maintaining the fine and performing arts at Portland High School.
Any other questions with you? Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Hearing from you. Okay, so we can unmute Jen Rank. Jen would like to know a little bit more about the hybrid model, and she's heard some different things. She keeps hearing that it's 2 days on or potentially 3. So Jen, do you want to clarify the question? Otherwise, I think I understand the meat of it.
Yeah, I just was curious because my understanding from the Board of Ed meetings was that if we were going into a hybrid model, class would meet either Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Friday in person, and then the other 3 days would be online learning. And a couple times people have said, you know, you have class the 2 days we're at home is a phrase that I've heard a couple times tonight. So I'm just clarifying for my own knowledge what the case is.
So, and I will defer to Dr. Britton from the district perspective. I can tell you that with high school curriculum, and I'm looking at Wednesdays as that target day, that's our day for personalization. So you may not see synchronous Google Meets on Wednesdays. You may see a teacher telling the 3 students who didn't do well on a certain concept that they have a little mini meet to remediate it and to answer the questions. I heard a lot from families in the spring that all day, every day in front of a computer was really affecting their kids. I think Wednesdays are a perfect day to catch up on your work, to participate in remediation, for teachers to plan and professionally develop, as well as for students to participate in asynchronous learning, including wellness activities. Did I misspeak, Dr. Britton?
No, yeah, so Jen,
because that's my idea.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the pattern for the hybrid schedule would be cohort AA, day off, BB, weekend or day off. Now, it works perfectly in a 5-day week that cohort A is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, cohort B, Thursday, Friday, weekend. But we all know that there are many weeks that are long weekends or 4-day weeks. So you have to kind of follow that pattern out. So it may be if it were a Labor Day weekend and we were starting on Tuesday, it might be cohort A, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off, cohort B, Friday, weekend, cohort B, Monday, the following Tuesday off, and then it kind of goes forward from there. So we'll look at the calendar and just think of the drumbeat: AA off, BB off, and by off I mean either the 1 day or the weekend. So it's not perfect, but it does create the ability for us to do the cleaning and space out the times that the cohorts are in the building, so that it dramatically reduces the chance for transmission.
Okay. I mean, I agree with that. I agree that my kids were getting burned out from being online 5 days a week. But that's okay with the state statutes. I know there's a required number of days that they have to be doing learning. And so will there still be learning expectations on the Wednesday? Or like you said, it's just going to be different for every classroom based on their needs?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the answer to that is when we would be expecting that work would be being done, and that so that we could count it as a school day for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. So Karen had another question about the minimum of 6 feet apart. Karen, do you want me to read the question, or do you want to chime in and ask it for everyone to hear?
You could answer it, but then I have one other quick question also. Yeah, I was just curious. I know that in the state guidelines, 6 feet apart had the caveat as feasible, or where feasible, or when feasible. And I'm wondering what Portland's commitment is to the 6 feet guidelines.
We've spent a lot of time with a tape measure and a clipboard, and it is feasible and will happen in all of our classrooms. And those classrooms that it's not feasible, we're going to relocate.
That is very comforting and good information for parents to have as they make their decisions, I'm sure. And then I had one other quick question, which was for those students that are required to do a 14-day quarantine, obviously would have been students that were in the classroom with their regular class schedule with their teachers. What will their learning look like for that 14-day quarantine, which would probably just be 10 school days, but what would they do?
That's an excellent question. And one of the things our teachers are going to have to be prepared for is to support students who might be home quarantining for 10 to 14 days. So our teachers now are used to students who, in normal circumstances, God forbid, get mono or are injured and are out for longer periods of time. So they do prepare those lessons for those students. We're just going to have to, tighten up on that and make sure that teachers understand that it may be more frequent that you are supporting students who are, of no fault of their own, required to stay home for the quarantine period.
And I have a high degree of confidence that the curriculum and the instruction will be able, that teachers are used to that. What I am working with Mrs. Davis, who is our Director of Pupil Services, on is ensuring that the supports that kids need to access that learning at home are in place. We saw that with some of our struggling learners we learned a lot from spring distance learning. And we want to make sure that we have the supports for our neediest learners.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I do want to add one other interesting thing that we're exploring is it may be likely this year that our teachers have to quarantine for 14 days, right? So and maybe if that happens, what we may find ourselves doing during that time when a teacher is quarantining for that period is having the room covered by a substitute teacher, but the teacher Google Meeting into the classroom. So sort of an inverted distance learning model, so that we're going to have to be really flexible and support the very real possibility that students may be out for extended periods of time and teachers may be out for extended periods of time more regularly than in a normal year.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have Jennifer Hennessy. If we could unmute Jennifer.
We did unmute her.
Oh, okay. Jennifer, you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Wonderful. Thank you again for having this forum. I feel it's very informative. My question was around synchronous learning, and I'm wondering, because I've seen other districts do it during the March, April, and May COVID outbreak. What happened is they ended up doing Google Classrooms, but they had one teacher go ahead and do classes as they would be in the building. So from 8:30 to 9:15, they'd have a class and so on and so forth. I'm wondering if that would be something that you can do for that synchronous learning if you ended up wanting to keep your student at home.
Okay, let me see if I can understand the question. So you're saying that if a family chooses to keep their students home, could we do synchronous learning with the teachers in the building and that student? Is that the question?
That's correct.
So what we're going to try to do is for students that are staying home, and again, that's going to, we're really going to be able to get definitive about this and stop talking about it kind of hypothetically on, August 7th when we send this survey out. So by the following Wednesday, Ms. Lawson is going to know specifically who those students are. We're going to, as we would with a student in normal circumstances, have that student work with the counselor to identify the classes that the student needs and create the program of studies and the whatever classes it is, depending on where the student is in the matriculation from 9th through 12th grade. So that may be a possibility, but we're primarily going to look to connect students who are choosing to be a part of the distance learning with their own group of teachers who would supervise and instruct that distance learning program. Ms. Lawson, did I describe that correctly? But that's sort of, we have to work out the details of that because it may be different student by student.
Well, and we may have a teacher that is overseeing the students in the synchronous learning section, but the material being provided by a content expert, say in geometry. For those of you who have watched the videos that the math department, Mr. Brecklin, has made that explain concepts, those may be things that kids, and some kids have accessed them pre-COVID, if they've missed a day or they've been absent or out sick. And it's just another tool, that flipped classroom, to get information into the hands of kids.
Okay. Can you clarify a little more though? Just because I feel like it's taking an extra step for the whole administration to go ahead and kind of have an additional teacher. I understand that there should be overseeing if the students are at home, but to have an additional teacher teach the class, I find that, that it's extra steps for everybody. And then for that social aspect of that particular student that may stay home, that they don't have their friends in those classrooms that they'd usually see them in. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I do know what you mean. And it has been an ongoing conversation, probably at the state and at the national level, around how does in-person and digital learning live in the same room? And where are the technologies? I think some districts are positioned in various different ways. We're very lucky here in Portland that we have such a strong base of technology. But we also have to think about planning for a distance learning lesson is different than planning for an in-person lesson. And having a teacher in a classroom where half their students are remote and half their students are in person could present a set of challenges that we haven't seen yet.
And that would have to, and I think that what if I'm envisioning what I think you're saying is couldn't we have one of these cameras that I have in front of me in the classroom with the other 14 students, while the 5 students who are distance learning are engaging in the classroom and watching remotely?
Correct.
Yeah, that opens all kinds of issues and challenges for the teacher to manage in terms of privacy of students, who's seeing what's happening through that camera's lens, and also some significant classroom management challenges in terms of managing the students who are in person and the students who would be participating remotely. That is a real discussion that's happening amongst superintendents and teachers associations about how that might work and the extent to which that might be possible. In general, I think the feeling amongst the teachers, which I have to respect, is that by asking me to teach 15 kids in person and potentially 10 students who are watching from home would be a little overwhelming for that teacher. And I can see that, having taught as long as I did, I can and do still. I certainly see how that could present a set of logistical challenges that might be unwieldy.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. It's just something to consider.
Yeah, and that is a hot button topic for sure. Okay, so Pamela Hanks. Again, Pamela, we'll unmute you, but your question was about chorus. I think we covered that. Did you have any follow-up, Pamela, about the fine and performing arts?
No, I don't have any follow-up. Thanks, though. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you. So again, Lisa Daggett also asked the question about masks. So Lisa, we'll quickly unmute you. I think we covered that, masks for everyone for sure. Did you have any follow-up to that?
No, no, I did have actually a different question though. And I apologize because I think you started to talk about this, but I think I missed it or I didn't understand it. But if you do a hybrid, so they're 2 days in, 2 days out, for like if you have like AP classes or honors classes that you need a specific teacher designated for that, is that still going to be available?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Laura Beeler asks an awesome question for Ms. Lawson for sure. Laura, you want to paraphrase it or explain it to everybody? Your question is about capstone and community service.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. Yeah, that's just the basic question. For seniors, will capstone and community service hours and requirements be the same? Just very basic question.
Yep. So capstone, yes. But we are working with our capstone committee to modify the expectations of the proposal. And I don't want that to be interpreted as less than them. But many of the activities that kids engaged in for capstone required interaction with the public. So the capstone committee and the students' mentors are working to modify their proposals so that they will be able to be safe and be safely done. It will be more of our creative problem solving, but yes, there will still be an expectation that graduating seniors complete a capstone experience. The community service will also, when we come back to school and we audit where our rising seniors are with their community service hours. What we oftentimes find when we sit down with seniors is they've usually done a lot more community service than they've handed in the little slips for or logged in the computer. And then we'll work with kids on a case-by-case basis to see if it's feasible for them to obtain their community service hours. We really do feel that it's an important part of their education. However, no one will be put at risk to complete them.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, thank you for having this meeting and for all that you're doing. I know this is a tremendous amount of work for all of you, and I really appreciate it.
It's an adventure.
Yeah,
it sure is.
And there's lots of silver linings in what we're doing. Lots of silver linings. It is definitely getting us to think deeply about teaching and learning, which is certainly a silver lining. So Jennifer, Hennessy, if we can unmute Jennifer again. She mentioned that she was confused about why there can't be a camera in the classroom with students at home sort of watching the class remotely. Jennifer, is that still your question, or did we cover that?
No, we covered that. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Okay, but Julie McPhee. Julie's wondering about substitutes and whether they'll go through safety training. Can we unmute Julie? I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
She emailed that in.
So to answer that, I think substitutes are going to be more important than they've ever been. And if you or anyone you know would like to register to be a substitute within the Portland Public Schools, we would absolutely like to talk with you with our sub-service. This is a shameless plug for substitutes because substitute teachers are very hard to find under the best of circumstances. And in many situations, not all, our substitute teachers are retired teachers who by definition will fall in high-risk groups. And I anticipate that many of them will not want to come out to be substitute teachers. So we are going to have a significant need. We've already partnered with our sub-service and our main office secretaries to do the safety and security training for COVID for our substitutes.
And I would just add, I don't think it's a shameless plug. I know a lot of people now are out of work. It's a terrible condition. If people are looking for some employment opportunities and potentially considering a career in education and would just like to see what it's like, please email. There's information about how to apply to be a sub on the website, or you can email me or Ms. Lawson and we'll put you in touch with the right people. But share this widely with your friends and neighbors, particularly if you know somebody who unfortunately has been furloughed or laid off. It's not a long-term commitment. You can do it day by day, but we would love to share information about how to become a substitute teacher.
And the state has also relaxed the guidelines due to the pandemic that I do not believe a full bachelor's degree is required anymore.
I think it's more about experience working with children
students.
and
Correct.
a certain number of credits.
Yep.
So. Okay, so Karen Reddick asks a terrific question about what will happen if a student gets sick during the school day, right? Can we unmute Karen? I want to make sure I understand the question. It appears to be if a student has a headache or exhibits a sign or symptom of COVID, while in school. Okay.
So, yes, that will absolutely be an automatic call home to parents, and it will be an err on the side of caution. I think we will be sending a lot of kids home from school who probably didn't need to go home from school. You know, as the mother of 5 teenagers myself, I very often said to kids, you need to go and you need to make it through the day. But we will not have that luxury. And I think the shift for students is going to be that the nurse's office may not be a place just to rest for a few minutes and get a Tylenol any longer, or a cough drop. The nurse's office is really going to be reserved for people who need it. I think the shift for families is that students will need to be picked up immediately when they are showing any symptoms, and that list of symptoms is long. We've established an isolation room in each of our nursing areas. We've also split our nursing office. So there's now a dedicated nursing office in the high school and one in the middle school, and that will cut down numbers as well. But I think one of the changes for kids and for families is that families will need backup plans to be able to come get their students right away if they're ill.
Yeah, that's going to be another pretty significant change in culture. Oftentimes now parents sign the Tylenol permission slip. So the student goes to the office and complains of a headache. Oftentimes it's, here's some Tylenol, go back to class. If a student has even the slightest sign or symptom of COVID, it's going to be wait in the isolation room and you'll be dismissed. Yeah, that is going to be a challenge to manage this year. There's going to be a lot more students exiting the building than in a normal year. So this one, boy, the next one here is from the YouTube live stream, and it's someone who is curious about managing infectious disease, and the comment is that surgeons change masks within 2 hours. Will teachers follow something similar, such as 3 mask changes per day protocol? I have not seen that in any guidelines. That's the time it's hitting my radar. That might be one that I bring to Dawn Davis or Dave Obuzinski, who is our lead nurse. I will follow up. I don't have an answer to that question. It's the first time I've heard about whether, I hope not. I mean, I've been wearing this for 2 days now, so I don't know. I'll find out. Okay, thank you for that. I really, because I can't answer it. So Patty Clark, potential distance learning, would group size, sorry, it moved up on me on there. So we can unmute Patty Clark, potential distance learning, would the group size for live sessions be a typical class size or similar? Patty, did we get that question right?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, just so I can prep my kid. Yeah, I don't know if we can expect small group, or is he going to be in a larger with 20 kids having to really get used to chat and raising his hand, like things like that?
So if we are in a full distance learning model, the class size will be the traditional class size. However, during the 90-minute class session, students may break out into smaller meeting rooms and work in small groups. If we are in the hybrid model, the class size will be divided in half. So the group that they would work with, if they were doing group work when they were home asynchronously, would be smaller. But yes, students will need to begin to learn, and teachers will be teaching them in the beginning, which is why I hope for everyone's sake, we at least get some time in person with students in the beginning of the year to learn those skills. How do you raise your hand? What is Google Meet etiquette? And those things, so that we begin to teach the kids the skills we want them to demonstrate.
Perfect, thanks.
All right, so it looks like we're to our last question from Sharon. If we can unmute Sharon, she would like to know, will there be reparations if students, or I think probably repercussions if students do not adhere to the guidelines? Is that correct, Sharon? Okay. So Sharon wants to know, will students get in trouble, it sounds like, if they don't wear masks?
And I think as with all things with student conduct and looking at social distancing and safety protocols across the community, because the school is a microcosm of the community, it will be on a continuum. Certainly, we want to teach kids pro-social and safe behavior. Students who, for whatever reason, masks or any other unsafe behavior, can't be in school.
Right.
And how we get there sometimes looks different for different kids. But we absolutely need to make sure that the kids know that this is a non-negotiable. As I say that out loud, I think there may be situations where a student with a special education learning profile and breathing difficulty, or a documented reason why someone else in the community might not be wearing a mask, we would have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. But we certainly, the expectation, and I'm very proud that in Portland, most of the time our students make the right decisions and meet our expectations.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And the kids want to be here.
Yeah.
The kids want to be here. And I think the message is going to be loud and clear that they need to do what they need to do. We will get closed to distance learning if people are running around without masks.
Yeah.
And that needs to be the message. I think our kids miss school.
Yeah. And we're lucky. There's really nice kids here. I'm sure there will be some instances.
I am too.
But I'm confident folks are going to do the right thing. So for the good of the order, that was our last question in the chat. Nick, do we have anybody that's raised their hands or otherwise wants to offer any final questions?
None that I know of.
Okay.
One comment from Meg Scott.
All right. The Board of Ed is working on a mask policy that would require all students and faculty and staff to wear masks, with the exception of those who have a medical reason not to, for sure. So, any closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts are very similar to what they were when we started this evening. I want parents to make informed decisions about whether or not to send their students back. I can assure families that we are doing everything we can possibly think of to make this a safe, clean environment, and will continue to do so for our staff and our students. I would, and here's my personal opinion, I would have no reservation sending my 14-year-old daughter to high school at Portland High School. So I'm available, like I said, to answer individual questions, to show anyone a classroom who'd like to see one, whatever I can do to help people make decisions.
And I would just end with saying that Portland High School is blessed with an extraordinarily talented principal and a remarkable faculty and staff. They are
remarkable faculty.
Yeah, they are
and staff.
Committed to kids, and they are going to do everything that needs to be done to keep us all safe. So I too would send my child to Portland High School come September 1st in an absolute heartbeat.
Thank you.
That doesn't guarantee anything, but
No.
we're doing everything we possibly can. So again, the reopening plan, as you know, is on the website. Ms. Lawson or I are available if anybody wants to email or has any follow-up questions. We'll be doing 4 more of these. If anybody wants to hear about what's happening at the middle school or Valley View or any of the other schools, tune in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week at 6 p.m. For Zoom meetings with the principals of those schools. Thank you all very much for your time. Stay healthy, stay well, and I look forward to seeing you all in person soon.
Say hi to your kids for me.